What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors walks onto a daytime talk show and refuses to play by the rules? What happens when polite conversation turns into a firestorm that nobody saw coming? Today, we're diving into the moment Michael J. Fox sat down with the View hosts and everything went completely off the rails. This wasn't your typical celebrity interview. It was a collision of perspectives that ended with security being called and a guest being escorted out while cameras were still rolling. The studio audience was buzzing with excitement as Michael J. Fox made his way onto the set. The applause was thunderous, the kind of reception reserved for true legends. He'd been invited to discuss his latest memoir and his continued advocacy work, topics that should have made for an inspiring feel-good segment. The hosts greeted him warmly, all smiles and enthusiasm. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed him with genuine affection, while Sunny host and Sarah Haynes beamed from their seats. Joy Behar, sitting at the far end of the table, offered a smile that seemed just a touch more measured. The conversation started pleasantly enough. Michael talked about his journey, his family, and the challenges he'd faced with grace and humor. The audience hung on every word, laughing at his jokes and applauding his candor. For the first few minutes, it was exactly what everyone expected, a heartwarming discussion with a man who had inspired millions. But then, Joy Behar shifted the conversation in a direction that would change everything. "So, Michael," Joy began, leaning forward slightly, "you've been very public about your condition and your advocacy, which is admirable. But I have to ask, don't you think that sometimes celebrity activism can come across as, well, a bit out of touch? I mean, you have resources that most people with Parkinson's could never dream of." The studio went noticeably quieter. Michael's expression didn't change much, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. He nodded slowly, as if considering the question carefully. "That's an interesting way to frame it, Joy," he replied, his voice steady. "Yes, I have resources. I'm fortunate, but that's exactly why I use my platform. I can open doors that are closed to others. I can fund research, raise awareness, and advocate for people who don't have a microphone. Isn't that the responsibility that comes with privilege?" Joy waved her hand dismissively. Sure. But let's be honest. When you talk about healthcare reform or research funding, you're not actually experiencing what regular people experience. You're not sitting in a clinic waiting for hours because you can't afford a specialist. You're not rationing medication because insurance won't cover it. So, how can you really speak for those people?" The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. Whoopi started to interject, but Michael raised his hand gently, indicating he wanted to respond. "Joy, I think you're confusing having resources with being disconnected," he said, his tone still calm, but with an edge creeping in. "I talk to people every single day who are going through exactly what you're describing. The foundation I work with doesn't just fund research in ivory towers. We help real families get access to care. We fight insurance companies. We push for policy changes that affect everyone, not just people who can afford premium healthcare. So, yes, I can speak for them because I'm working alongside them." Joy wasn't backing down, "But you're doing it from a position of comfort, Michael. That's my point. It's easy to be an advocate when you're not actually suffering the consequences of a broken system. You can afford the best doctors, the best treatments, experimental therapies that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, someone working 2 jobs just to keep their insurance is being told they don't qualify for basic care. Are you suggesting I should apologize for being able to afford treatment?" Michael's voice was sharper now. The audience was completely silent, sensing the tension escalating. "I'm suggesting," Joy continued, "that maybe you should acknowledge that your experience is fundamentally different from the average person's and that your activism, while well-intentioned, might not actually represent their reality." Michael leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "You know what, Joy? You're right about one thing. My experience is different, but not in the way you think. Yes, I can afford treatment, but do you know what doesn't care about money? This disease. Do you know what doesn't discriminate? Progressive neurological conditions. I might have access to better doctors, but they're telling me the same thing they tell everyone else. We don't have a cure yet. We're doing the best we can. Keep fighting. The desperation I feel is the same desperation that every person with Parkinson's feels. The fear is the same. The frustration is the same. Money doesn't make that go away. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Michael wasn't finished. "And here's what really gets me about your argument," he continued, his voice rising slightly. "You're essentially saying that because I have money, I should shut up and not advocate for change. That my voice is less valid because I'm not poor enough or struggling enough. That's not just wrong, it's dangerous. Should wealthy people not fight for better schools because their kids go to private ones? Should wealthy people not care about healthcare because they're not sick? That's not how social progress works, Joy." "I'm not saying you should shut up," Joy shot back, her own voice getting louder. "I'm saying you should be more aware of your privilege and not pretend that your advocacy is the same as lived experience." "I never pretended that." Michael's hands were shaking now, though it was unclear if it was from emotion or his condition. "I've always been upfront about my advantages, but I'm not going to apologize for using them to help people. That's what you don't seem to understand. This isn't about me positioning myself as some kind of everyman. It's about using whatever platform and resources I have to make things better for everyone." Sunny host tried to jump in, clearly attempting to de-escalate. "I think what Michael is saying is that advocacy comes in many forms, but Joy wasn't letting it go. "No, Sunny. What I'm hearing is someone who's defensive about being called out for essentially performing activism from a place of privilege." That word performing hit like a bomb. Michael's face flushed red. The audience gasped audibly. "Performing," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You think this is a performance? You think the 20-plus years I've spent building a foundation, funding research, and talking about something that's taken so much from me is just an act? When one of Hollywood's most beloved actors walks onto a daytime talk show and refuses to play by the rules, sparks are bound to fly." What began as a warm, uplifting interview soon spiraled into one of the most intense exchanges daytime TV had seen in years. When Michael J. Fox sat down with The View, and everything went completely off the rails. The studio audience erupted in applause as Michael entered the set, smiling and gracious as ever. He was there to promote his new memoir and discuss his ongoing work in Parkinson's research, a subject close to his heart. The hosts greeted him warmly. Whoopi Goldberg's affection was genuine. Sunny host and Sarah Haynes were glowing, but Joy Behar's polite smile carried a hint of caution. For the first several minutes, the conversation was exactly what everyone expected: heartfelt, funny, and deeply human. Michael talked about family, resilience, and the unpredictable challenges of living with Parkinson's. The audience laughed, applauded, and leaned in. But then Joy changed the tone. "So, Michael," she began, leaning forward, "you've been very open about your illness and your activism, which is admirable, but don't you think celebrity activism can come across as a little out of touch? You have resources that most people with Parkinson's could never dream of." The audience fell quiet. Michael paused, then gave a small nod. "That's an interesting question, Joy," he said evenly. "Yes, I have resources. I'm lucky, but that's exactly why I do what I do. I can use my platform to raise awareness, fund research, and open doors that would otherwise stay closed. Isn't that part of the responsibility that comes with privilege?" Joy's smile thinned. "Sure, but let's be honest. When you talk about health care reform, you're not standing in line at an underfunded clinic. You're not rationing meds because insurance won't cover them. So, how can you truly speak for those people?" Michael stayed composed, though a hint of tension crept into his voice. "Joy, having resources doesn't mean I'm disconnected. I work directly with patients and families. My foundation doesn't just write checks. It funds programs, supports research, and helps people get real access to care. I'm not speaking for them. I'm working with them." Joy shook her head. "But you're doing it from a place of comfort. That's my point. It's easy to fight for a cause when you don't have to live through the system's failures yourself." Michael's tone sharpened. "Are you suggesting I should apologize for being able to afford treatment?" Joy leaned back. "I'm suggesting that maybe your advocacy looks different from the reality most people face and that it's okay to admit that." Michael's jaw tightened. "You're right. My experience is different, but not in the way you think. Money doesn't cure this. It doesn't stop the tremors. It doesn't erase the fear. I might have access to doctors, but they're telling me the same thing they tell everyone else. There's no cure yet. I live with the same uncertainty, the same loss of control. That's what connects me to others with this disease. The audience stayed silent. Joy opened her mouth again, but Michael continued, "What you're really saying, Joy, is that because I'm not poor enough or struggling enough, I shouldn't speak. That's not just unfair, it's dangerous. Should healthy people stay quiet about health because they're not sick? Should wealthy people stop fighting for better schools because their kids go to private ones? That's not how progress works." Joy's voice rose. "I'm not saying you should shut up. I'm saying be aware of your privilege. Don't act like your experience is the same as everyone else's." "I've never claimed that," Michael shot back, emotion in his voice. "I've always been transparent about my advantages. But I won't apologize for using them to help people." Before Whoopi could step in, Joy said sharply, "Then stop performing activism from a place of privilege." The word hung in the air like a slap. Michael froze. "Performing," he repeated quietly. "You think this is a performance? You think the decades I've spent building a foundation, funding research, lobbying Congress, visiting families, that's all just a hobby for some rich guy? Some performance for the cameras?" "That's not what I said," Joy protested, suddenly defensive. "That's exactly what you said," Michael countered, his voice trembling with restrained anger. "You just dismissed my life's work as an act. Do you have any idea how insulting that is? Not just to me, but to every researcher, every patient, every person who's benefited from what we've done." Joy crossed her arms. "Oh, so now I can't question you because you've done charity work. That's convenient." "Question me all you want," Michael said tightly. "But don't trivialize what I've dedicated my life to. Don't sit there healthy and comfortable and tell me that what I've built is performance art. You want to talk about being out of touch? You're a millionaire TV host lecturing me about suffering." The audience gasped. Whoopi raised a hand. "Okay, let's all take a breath," but Joy pushed forward. "You don't know anything about what I've faced, Michael. And frankly, this reaction kind of proves my point. You get defensive the moment anyone challenges you. You made it personal." Michael shot back, his voice cracking. "You question my integrity, my motives, my purpose. What did you expect me to do? Smile and nod while you tear down everything I've worked for?" The tension in the studio was thick. Sarah Haynes spoke softly. "Maybe we should move on to your book." Michael shook his head. "No, this matters." He turned back to Joy. "You're framing this as concern for regular people. But what you're really doing is gatekeeping who's allowed to speak on issues that affect everyone. That's not fairness. That's silencing." Joy folded her arms. "I'm asking for honesty. When people see you talk about hope, that's inspiring. But for someone who can't get a basic appointment or medication, that hope can feel hollow, like you're selling something they can't afford." Michael gripped the arms of his chair. "So, what would you have me do? Stop funding research because it might give people hope? Stop pushing for better access because I have access myself? Should I just stay silent and comfortable?" Joy shot back. "I think you should acknowledge that your optimism comes from a place of security. You're not in the same boat as everyone else. You're in a yacht while others are drowning." The audience collectively winced. Whoopi closed her eyes and Sunny looked stricken. Michael went very still. When he spoke again, his tone was icy calm. "A yacht," he repeated. "Let me tell you what my yacht looks like, Joy. It looks like waking up every morning not knowing if I can button my shirt. It looks like scheduling my life around medication, praying I don't seize on live television. It looks like watching my children grow and wondering how much of their lives I'll still be around for. It's reading research papers at 3 a.m. praying for a breakthrough. That's my yacht. The same boat millions of others are in. Except I'm using my resources to build a better one for all of us." Joy's expression softened slightly, but she stayed firm. "Michael, I understand your pain. I'm not denying that." But before she could finish, Whoopi stepped in, her tone final. "All right, we're taking a break." The audience applauded nervously as the camera cut to commercial, leaving behind a table heavy with unspoken words and one of the most unforgettable clashes in The View's history. "You have to see that there's a difference between suffering with support and suffering alone," Joy continued once they were back on air. You have a team of people helping you. You have access to every possible treatment. Most people don't have that. And when you don't acknowledge that difference, it feels dismissive of their reality. I acknowledge it constantly, Michael said, his voice rising. Every speech I give, every interview I do, I talk about the disparities in healthcare. I talk about how wrong it is that zip code and income determine quality of care. I've testified before Congress about this exact issue. So, for you to sit there and accuse me of not acknowledging it is either incredibly ignorant or deliberately dishonest. Joy's face flushed with anger. Ignorant? You're calling me ignorant now. If the shoe fits, Michael shot back. You clearly haven't bothered to actually follow my work, or you'd know that everything you're accusing me of is the opposite of what I actually do. You came into this conversation with a preconceived narrative, and you're sticking to it regardless of the facts I'm presenting. Oh, please. Joy scoffed. Don't act like you're some misunderstood martyr here. You're a celebrity who gets praised constantly for doing the bare minimum. Oh, Michael J. Fox started a foundation. How amazing. Meanwhile, there are nurses and caregivers and actual health workers in the trenches every day who don't get a fraction of the recognition you do. The bare minimum. Michael looked genuinely stunned. We've raised over $2 billion for Parkinson's research. We've funded studies that have led to major breakthroughs in understanding the disease. We've helped thousands of patients get access to clinical trials and treatment options they wouldn't have had otherwise. And you call that the bare minimum? What have you done, Joy? Besides sit here and tear down people who are actually trying to make a difference. The studio went completely silent. Joy's mouth opened and closed, her face reening. Sunny put her hand over her mouth. Whoopi leaned forward about to intervene, but Joy found her voice first. How dare you? She said, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you suggest that I don't contribute or care about important issues? I've used this platform for years to advocate for causes I believe in. Just because I'm not sick doesn't mean I don't care about health. But apparently being sick and advocating for health means I'm performing. Michael countered sharply. You can dish it out, but you can't take it. Is that it? You can question my entire life's purpose, but the second I question what you've actually done, suddenly I'm out of line. Joy stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You know what? I don't have to sit here and be insulted by someone who's apparently forgotten that this is my show. Actually, it's our show. Whoopi interjected firmly, trying to regain control. And Joy, sit down. Michael, let's all take a breath. But Joy remained standing, pointing at Michael. No, I'm done. I asked a legitimate question about privilege and activism. And instead of having a mature conversation about it, he's attacked me personally, questioned my integrity, and acted like because he has a disease, he's beyond criticism. Michael stood up as well, facing her directly. You didn't ask a legitimate question. You came at me with an agenda. You wanted to make me look like some out-of-touch rich guy who doesn't understand real problems. And when I pushed back with actual facts about the work I do, you doubled down and insulted me further. So yeah, I questioned your integrity because you've shown you don't have any. Get out, Joy said suddenly, her voice sharp and final. The audience gasped. Sunny's eyes went wide. Sarah looked at Whoopi for guidance. Whoopi stood up quickly. Joy, you can't just I absolutely can. Joy cut her off. This is my segment. I brought him on to discuss his book, and instead he's turned it into a personal attack against me. I don't have to tolerate this. Michael, I think you should leave. Michael laughed, but there was no humor in it. You brought me on to ambush me with bad faith questions, and now you're kicking me out because I didn't roll over and take it. This is unbelievable. You were rude. You were disrespectful. And you insulted me on live television, Joy said, her voice rising. You don't get to come on the show and treat me like that in front of an audience. I treated you exactly the way you treated me, Michael replied coldly. The only difference is that I backed up everything I said with facts while you just kept throwing out accusations based on nothing. Joy turned to someone off camera. Can we get security, please? I want him escorted out. The audience erupted in a mix of gasps and murmurs. Several people shouted, no, while others seemed stunned into silence. Whoopi stepped between Michael and Joy, her hands raised. "Okay, everybody needs to calm down right now," she said firmly. "This has gotten completely out of hand. Joy, you cannot call security on a guest in the middle of a live show because you had a disagreement. It's not a disagreement, it's disrespect."